We turn our attention now to the pros and cons of a last will and testament. That's as September marks Wills Month. We are now joined by Capital Legacy CEO Alex Simeonides. Thank you so much for your time, Alex. What an important conversation to be having on the first day of the first month of September, the first day of the new month of September, rather. And interestingly is that trends when it comes to a last will of testament, have they really changed in South Africa, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, and lessons learned there?
Well, yes. I mean, you want to kind of forget about COVID. You want to forget about what's impact, but it certainly changed the psyche of the South African here in South Africa. More and more people, as a result of it, have been doing their wills. But there's also been another trend where the younger generation is starting to appreciate, the younger South African generation are starting to appreciate crossing their T's and dotting their I's and being responsible. And so we're actually also seeing a large amount of 20-somethings coming through and saying, let me do my will. I want to make sure I've got my affairs in order.
That's interesting and a very good development, Alex, but we must also talk about the importance of doing this early, but at the same time, having to review this particular document as one grows older.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to just do it once and then leave it there for 30 years. The classic story is, people who went to the army, did it when they were in the army, and then they pass away 50 years later. It needs to keep up with you, and you're going to be looking for key events when to keep it updated.
What goes into a last will and testament? I know it's a question that we should all have an answer to, but history has taught us otherwise.
Well, I think our first point of call is to say, well, I'm going to leave my stuff to these people. That's the first thing. But it also does other important things like appointing who's going to execute your estate, who's going to be the trustee of the trust for your kids. You could also put wishes down in terms of who you want to be your guardians. So it's not just about your stuff going to people. It's about also who's appointed to caretake your legacy if you pass away.
Alex, the reason why I asked that question is because essentially the law is somewhat cast in stone, particularly where there's precedent, and in this regard, that's exactly the case. But we've seen many other issues that have played themselves out in the country's courts when it comes to the likes of civil marriages, defining what that is, and dynamics that have come into play with interrelationships, and then it translates into the lack of a will or the existence of a will that does not speak to whatever relationship that maybe you and I would have had. What's to be said about the change in dynamics and the landscape in that regard, given the court cases that we've seen recently?
Yeah, I mean, the controversy we experienced there, I think it was not to say the Zulu Kingdom, it pointed to the fact that, and I said this in another interview, it pointed to the fact that when you're doing your will and maybe you've got your life's maybe a little bit complex, you need professionals. You need professionals to look in totality in terms of your situation. You can't just do a will and hope it's going to cut through the other complexities in your life. So if that's your situation, seek out the help of a professional. Don't think you can maybe do it yourself in isolation, because they all need to work together. How you married, your will, what you own. Not to scare off people, because our job this month is to get people to do a will, because it's better than not having a will. But if you do have complexity, get a professional.
Is it ever too late to draw up this document?
It's never too late. It's never too early. It's something down is better than nothing done. So it's never too late to get it done. It's never too late to update it. Especially if you've had a child, you bought a house, you got married, maybe divorced. Never too late.
Alex, lastly, what are the cons of not having a last will and testament in South Africa? Often we hear of stories that beneficiaries are seeking to claim from those who have left them assets, but it then becomes a tricky situation in terms of tracing.
So, for me personally, I think doing a will is a testament to you being a responsible adult, to you being responsible for those who depend on you. And doing a will gives you that peace of mind. Not having a will makes you second guess how they're going to be cared for, and give that guidance, your last words, so that you don't have this confusion and everyone coming in when it's too late. So that for me is the most important thing of why to have one and therefore not.
As a parting shot on the legal side of things, when it comes to contestation, Alex, I think it's important that we also highlight that the need for professionals becomes of serious importance when one seeks to contest a particular document that is legally binding. What's the status of that particular element in the context of this conversation?
It's a huge task to contest a will. Sometimes it's absolutely necessary. But you can't just use the Master's Office. You're going to have to use what we call a high court in South Africa. That means you're going to need to get an attorney, an advocate. It's going to come with some expense. So best engage and see if there can't be another plan that can be sought out in terms of the problems that are causing you to want to contest.
Thank you so much for your insights. That's Alex Simeonides, who is the CEO at Capital Legacy, talking to us about the importance of drawing up a last will and testament. Of course, it is September, and this month marks Wills Month.